Hello everyone, today we're going to go over some Arc Nova openings. I'll explain my choices for my opening 4 cards, as well as how I expect round 1 to go, and other things I'm looking out for. So these are 5 of my recent games. We'll start from easiest choices to hardest choices. Game 1, we're on Observation Tower. Our end goals are Sponsored Zoo and Diverse Species, not too worried about them. The projects are Primates, Africa, and Habitat Diversity. The first thing I do when I look at my opening hand is look for generically strong cards. We see federal grants here. There is never an opening hand where I'm not picking this, so it's an easy decision to lock in. The next thing I'm looking for is cards that relate to these base projects. We don't see any Africa or primates. Obviously all the animals are going to help towards habitats, but we only have Europe and Australia, and this Australia doesn't really count because you need a partner zoo, so no help there. I'm also looking for little combos I can make. So one combo in this hand is there is the red deer, which is a herbivore, and herbivore breeding program. So immediately this gives me a project to support in round 2, which is one thing that I'm looking to do. The 4th pick here is really a toss-up. Some people might say engineer, but I don't really rate the card that much at all. Sea Cave is another possibility. It has a lot of upside on this map. Release projects are better than usual because you can trigger the tower twice, and at the same time these milestones for 5 and 8 CP are very important because there's a university and a partner zoo on them. Whoever hits 5 and 8 CP first is going to have a big advantage. So that would be 2 good reasons for keeping the Sea Cave. But there's also an eagle in here, which is one of the strongest late game animals. I think you could justify going either direction, but I choose to keep the eagle. There are some interesting things in the opening display. The bird breeding program is interesting because we have the eagle and we are already going to get the Europe Partner Zoo. So that's one thing I'm looking out for sort of round 3 or 4. Another cute combo is Science Institute and Science Museum. That's a possibility, but it would be very hard to get both cards, because I imagine if I took one that my opponent would take the other, and vice versa. And then there's also the Fox, which is just an easy way to support Africa too. But we are second player, so we're just going to be reacting to what our opponent does. The plan for round 1 is pretty simple. Build a size 3 next to the tower, get the Europe Partner Zoo, play federal grants, play the deer, snap something from the display, maybe bird breeding program because we're already going to be keeping 2 cards going into the next round, and then try to cause the break as soon as possible after that. And long term the plan is to win Habitats 5 so we can get this university and partner zoo, and we can achieve that by getting a second worker straight after the second break and start getting some partner zoos, as well as looking out for any other animals that meet the criteria. For game 2 we're on Hollywood Hills. The projects are predators, herbivores, and habitat diversity. Our end goals are diverse species and climbing park. Again, not too worried about those, nothing impactful there. And we are first player. A quick scan of the hand, there doesn't seem to be anything generically strong, so I'm looking for things related to these projects. Expert in herbivores is a very nice pick. We can use it to go all the way up to 5 or just a quick support at 2 depending on what else there is. There is a zebra here, but it's very unplayable early, requiring 3 Africa icons, so that's really out of the question. There's no other predators or herbivores. Again, with habitat diversity here, this along with species diversity are really 2 of the easier projects that you can go for, so I'm going to look for animals that can help me with this. This makes the frilled lizard quite a good pick, because Australia and Europe are 2 of the harder to find continents. There are less animals from them. You generally prefer not to get a partner zoo with that continent, so the frilled lizard has that Australia icon, which is a bit harder to find. Pick 3 and 4 aren't as clear. Some people would argue for the petting zoo pick, but I'm not a huge fan when there's habitat diversity here. It's the only animal that doesn't contribute to it. The other animals are reasonably unplayable early, so I'm looking for some potential upside with the release of patents and the Africa release. And upon seeing this display, our plans for round 1 slightly change because we see federal grants here. And generally if it's on the display, you want to do everything in your power to get it. Thankfully for us, we are first player and it's near the bottom of the reputation range. So the first 2 moves of this game now are going to be grab one of these universities that give reputation and build a size 2 enclosure. Touching this, take 1 card from within reputation range. This round we don't mind going on for a long time. We have 2 very playable sponsors here, and there's more on the display. Our short-term plan is going to be get these 2 sponsors played, get the frilled lizard played, and hope to draw into a second herbivore to support early. If not, just really rush for Habitats 5. Game number 3, we're on the Observation Tower again. We have Sponsored Zoo and Aquatic Park. This does influence my decision a little bit. I rate Aquatic Park as one of the worst end goals, so I'm more inclined to go for sponsors here. The projects are Asia, herbivores, and habitat diversity again. Generically strong cards in this opening hand. I'd consider Spokesperson one of them. This is one of the easier ways to get your second worker. If you start with the 2 rep uni and cover the reputation spot on the map, you've got 5 reputation before the first break. In the hand we also have the Indian peafowl. I'm quite happy to take any posturing bird. I think this is one of the top 2 of them. Extra bonus because Asia is one of the projects, so we can keep that as a potential playable animal. The downside is that we are second player, so our opponent could potentially take the Asia Partner Zoo away from us. To go with the peafowl, I like the ornithologist here. Birds in general are the strongest animal in the game, so even though I don't personally rate cards like expert in predators or expert in herbivores, unless they're part of the project, I think ornithologist is one exception to that. You're pretty much always happy playing birds, and it gives you a steady stream of money. The last pick, you could make a few arguments. The elephant is part of 2 of the projects. From my point of view, I don't really consider it part of the Asia project, because by the time I want to be supporting Asia, these 2 icons won't matter. It is a herbivore which could help for long-term getting to 5, but that's very, very long-term. I'm not really worried about that at this stage. And while the elephant is one of the better animals in the game, my plan is to never start with the hand size uni, which means it's going to be stuck in my 3-card hand for quite a while. So I decided to take Migration Recording. It has some synergy with Spokesperson, giving that extra reputation, and it can just be a strong card in general. And it's totally okay to start with 3 or even 4 sponsors. One of the things about the distribution of Arc Nova cards is that animals are much easier to find, so if you start with 3 or 4 good sponsors, don't be afraid to start with all of them. There's nothing on the display here that's really overly appealing. The ideal plan for round 1 would be to start with the Asia Partner Zoo, but if the opponent starts with it, we have a fallback plan of starting with the 2-rep uni and then playing Spokesperson. These are just 2 solid ways to get a second worker, either through reputation with Spokesperson or through Asia 2 with the peafowl and worker from the reward. They do let us start with the Asia Partner Zoo, so the plan is to just build a size 3, play ornithologist, play the peafowl, and then try to cause the break and go into the next round supporting Asia 2. Now we're getting into some of the trickier hands. For game 4, we're on outdoor areas. Our endgame goals are small animal and aquatic, which again we're not very happy to see. And the projects are Asia, Africa, and Europe. So one thing to note immediately about the projects is none of them synergize with each other. Normally if you have things like species diversity and Africa and reptiles or something, you can have animals that help with 2 or even 3 of those projects at once. But here each animal or sponsor you play is only going to help with 1 at a time. That makes these projects quite difficult to complete. Looking at the opening hand, the only real strong card I consider is Explorer, but that is not something that's going to be played in round 1. This is after sponsors is upgraded, but it is a good enough reason to keep it and upgrade sponsors just for it. We have a crocodile for Africa, but it's very unplayable, requiring 3 reptiles. The herpetologist I'm not a huge fan of. Reptiles is not one of the projects, and stronger players don't typically play that many reptiles. Because these projects are so difficult to complete, and because we're on outdoor areas with the Partner Zoo on the floor, I think there's a really good argument to keep both bird breeding and herbivore breeding program. It's not guaranteed, but there's a decent chance we'll be able to draw something out of the opening display that's either a bird or a herbivore that's playable. And that would give us a project to support in round 2, even round 1 if we're lucky enough and the opponent has other things to do. The last pick really comes down to the Wallaby or Migration Recording. Migration I'm less inclined to keep because we're already going to be keeping Explorer and probably these 2 projects going into the next break, which means this would have to be discarded anyway. The Wallaby is a single petting zoo animal, but it's one of the better ones, having the pouch ability, and the petting zoo shape is quite nice on this map, just really allowing you to get this Partner Zoo much quicker. The opening display has a lot of primates, has an America release, and it has a white stork, which is not bad at all. It actually fits with the Europe project, it fits with our bird breeding program, so that could be an option to snap up. But given we have no sponsors to play and all these cards that really require round 2 to happen, there's no reason to prolong round 1. We don't really want it to go on too long. Because of that, the first move of the game from us is just moving the break forward 5. The opponent might have a good start, they might have a bad start, but there's no reason for us to wait around and find out. A solid plan for the next few moves would be take the Europe Partner Zoo, snap up the white stork, build a size 4, play it, and just cause the break. That way, start around 2, we can support bird breeding program, and we're on our way to Europe 5. Game 5, we're on Silver Lake. Our endgame goals are Research Zoo and Diverse Species. Research Zoo I'm reasonably happy with. The projects are Africa, Europe, and Reptiles. There is not a lot going on in this opening hand. There's no generically strong cards. I guess the closest would be the Fur Seal. Giving that extra worker early is very useful. And especially on Silver Lake, this is a very playable animal. Not in round 1 obviously, because you need the upgraded animals, but this is a good way of getting a second worker in round 2. Native Lizards is generally strong, it's just a bit tricky on Silver Lake because you generally want to be building around the lake and all these 5 rocks are over here. But because reptiles are one of the projects, it's definitely worth keeping. Because of that, we're also incentivized to keep sponsorship reptiles, because we will probably be playing reptiles at some point. And while I do generally rate the Sloth Bear This is not something that we want to be playing too early. The boost association action isn't going to give us any value early, so I think you can make an argument to keep the boa constrictor for later. The opening display gives a couple of different options. There is the ring-tailed lemur, which would be an easy support at Africa 2. There's also the red deer for Europe 2. You could also ignore both of them and just plan to play the first seal in the second round. I think all those choices are viable, so it's really a playstyle preference. As we are first player, plan 1 would be grabbing the Africa Partner Zoo first move, snapping up the lemur, building a size 3, playing it, maybe selling some of the lizard stuff, and then just start of round 2, aim to support Africa at 2, and aim to play the first seal after that. The benefit of that is it allows you to take 5 income as your first reward as opposed to the second worker. The plan I went for in this game was building the size 5, getting the hand size uni, causing the break as soon as possible, and then starting round 2 with a second uni, upgrading animals and playing the first seal. I haven't mentioned it for any of the previous games, but while we're talking about the early game, I do get asked quite often about the order of action upgrades. In a standard game, build and animals are going to be my first 2 upgrades all of the time. Normally build first. Because build is such an inefficient action, you want to be doing it as little as possible. Being able to put kiosks and pavilions down as well as your small enclosures really helps with your early income. Usually animals is second, because one of the goals of the early game is to rush up this reputation track. You want to reach 5 to unlock one of your card upgrades, and you want to reach 8 to get your second or even third worker. Playing animals at 5 gives you 1 reputation obviously, and it's something that you want to be doing before the end of the game anyway, because a lot of the high-powered animals, like the first seal, require the animals upgrade, and if you don't have it, you'll be stuck at the end of the game not being able to play eagles and elephants. Sponsors I will normally not upgrade in a standard game, but there are exceptions if I see Explorer or Talented Communicator. These are cards worth upgrading sponsors for, and if I have one or both of those cards, I'll upgrade sponsors as first or second choice, because it's very important to get those cards down as soon as possible. I see a lot of players upgrading cards as first or second choice, and this is normally a mistake. Being able to draw from reputation is okay, but it gets much better as the game goes on when you're up further in the reputation track. It's less important while you're down here. And the main benefit of upgrading cards is being able to get past 9 reputation, which is not a problem in the early game. Unless you have a card like Spokesperson or Archaeologist giving you a lot of reputation, it can usually come third or fourth. If I'm upgrading sponsors, I'll normally leave out Association, but if I'm not upgrading sponsors, then Association will normally come fourth. The main benefits of the Association upgrade are being able to spend X tokens to do multiple actions, and being able to donate. And these are both typically things that you'll want to be doing later in the game as well. For starters, at the start of the game, you're just not going to have that many workers or X tokens to spend. And while you can usually justify a couple of early donations, once you start donating 7 or 10 money, it really hurts. And if you donate that too early, you really ruin your income tempo. When you're paying money for animals, they increase your appeal, which helps you generate income. When you pay money for conservation points, it doesn't help your income, and it can leave you in a bit of a mess if you donate too much too early. Hopefully that was helpful. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. Next video we'll be covering some mid-game tactics, so stay tuned for that. Thanks for watching and see you later.